What's up? This is Tiana from Straight from the Crates. Today we are talking about Mariah Carey versus Whitney Houston. Not just about who can sing, because technically both of them are vocal monsters. But the question I want to ask is who had more soul and who was more controversial? And also, why were these two black women allowed to become global pop icons when so many others weren't? And I want to be honest with you all. I did not like Mariah Carey in her prime. Really not a fan right now. I just don't connect to it. I don't feel it. And in my opinion, her sound was too perfect and polished. But I will say it wasn't until the early 2000 the late 90s and early 2000s that I finally was just like, okay, I hear you now. And, it resonated with me and I could feel, what she was talking about and I liked the music. But with that being said, there is that Christmas album and, I really don't feel it at all. I know the whole United States loves it, but to me, it lacks soul. And, I don't like that Christmas album. But some people would say the same thing about Whitney's first two albums, that they lacked soul and nobody connected to it. So I want to ask, what is soul really and who actually had it? And I want to define it because I feel like people throw that word around like they automatically know what it is. And I want to start with what soul is not. It's not just who can do the best runs like Kim Burrell, who can hit the highest notes, and who can do the best vocal gymnastics. That is not soul. And what I say soul is expressing a lived experience, imperfections, textures in your sound, and an emotional weight. I think that's the difference between I'm singing this song versus I survived this song. And for me, Whitney Houston, her voice had, I could hear church in it, or how I feel about church, or how people in the church express themselves and sing in the choir. So even when she had those really pop albums and the production was extremely polished, her voice still carried, and the gospel upbringing still connected and went through. Like there was an emotional conviction. But the issues, I think that her first two albums, they were so controlled and safe. And I don't believe that was, Whitney's choice. That was all Clive Davis. And they made her into one of the most palatable people for mainstream America. So this wasn't the raw Whitney Houston that that she's known for today. She was the most acceptable Whitney. And in Mariah Carey's case, she came in, she was, a background singer. She wrote all of her songs. She had a little whistle register that people, leaned on. Um, but she was very manufactured, and all of her like emotions felt like I know how to sound emotional, but I'm not emotional. And I feel like that's why people like me didn't really connect with her. And I feel like for a moment, a lot of black people felt disconnected as well. Not because she couldn't sing, because as I stated, she's a great singer. She was just marketed not towards us and early on. It's like the production leaned to more of a contemporary pop style, and her image was, distant. It didn't we didn't know if she was white or black for a while. And she was being controlled by Tommy Mottola. So we got Clive Davis for Whitney, and Tommy Mottola, who Mariah Carey was actually married to, was all, both two of these men were controlling an image. And meanwhile, Whitney, even at her most polished, she still felt culturally rooted, in my opinion. And I'm going to say again that Mariah Carey didn't land for people until, the album Butterfly or Rainbow in the early 2000s. Like I said before, that's kind of like when she got out of that marriage, took control of her life, and started, being more hip hop, being with the Brat, doing um, what is it, the remixes to her songs, like with ODB, and then with Mason Puff Daddy. So she in my opinion she became more human, and that's when people were like, okay, now I hear what's going on, and we felt it. But I'm gonna bring up this Christmas album again because it's so iconic. But I would like to critique it a little bit. It's technically flawless, but does it have soul? Some people will say yes. For others, it feels commercial, overproduced, emotionally distant compared to other gospel soul Christmas albums. And it's a total difference. So I'm saying it's not about her skill, it's all about the feeling. Like that Carey Christmas album does not speak to me how the Temptations Christmas album does, or even the Jackson 5's Christmas album. So let's just get back. I'm sorry, I keep going off. Let's talk about why Whitney and Mariah were allowed to cross over globally as Black women, because it wasn't just their talent. I think it was strategy, along with along with politics around gender. So they were both very palatable and presented in ways that made white audience more comfortable. So I'm thinking like they, controlled their images, made them non-threatening, very feminine. They didn't like have any political expression, and the engineering was designed to be a split, in my opinion, between R&B and pop, and that was not on accident. That was like major marketing. The machine was behind both of them. And also I think it has to do with timing. The 80s and the 90s like was a very specific window. Like MTV expansions, the globalization of pop music, labels looking for crossover artists. They also had the gatekeepers, Clive Davis, Time and Mottola, and they weren't just executive, they were like architects. They shaped the sound, they shaped the image, and they had audience access. So it was respectability politics, and mostly about how women were being positioned in ways that aligned with the beauty standards, behavior, and expectations. So they were just marketed as female comfort artists. And I think that's why Whitney at first was too pop for the Black audience. And later, she her personal life became almost a, I don't want to call it a public spectacle, but I think that's what it is, what it was. And she was able to reclaim her soul and life through her rawness. But Mariah, she was married to the industry. And then she also, had, her identity. She was, racially ambiguous, which also helped with the marketing of her. But then she had, a breakdown after the divorce, and, being freed from, Tommy Mottola. So that, I say, that's the difference in their controversy, because Whitney became a tragic story, and Mariah became like a survivor story about regaining your autonomy. So the question is, who have more soul? I'd say that Whitney had a more natural inherited spirit. So the soul, it flowed through, it came through, it touched us all. And I believe that Mariah had to grow into her soul over time. Things had to happen to her in order for her to, express these feelings. So I don't know. I wouldn't say either one of them lack soul. I wouldn't say either one of them were just lucky. I think they both are very soulful singers, and they were strategically placed and marketed along with being exceptionally talented, and they were around during the moment when the industry was able to sell this version of black womanhood. So that's my take on it. I don't think one has more soul than the other, and they, in my opinion, they're almost have the same trajectory. So you guys let me know. This is another one from Straight from the Crates. Share your opinions. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll get back with you guys later. Peace.